Somehow in 6 years we've never done that song, so I was very happy that I came up with that. Easy question. Half of you got the answer to this already, because half of you were here when Jim welcomed us, but then you just keep streaming in. It's kind of cool. People keep coming in here. It wasn't just you, Barbie. A lot of people came in afterwards. Veterans Day was based on what former holiday? Armistice Day. Very, very easy. Armistice Day honors what event? End of World War I. 100 years ago today, almost these just a few hours ago. Harder question, and here's a tough one. And why was Armistice Day established on November 11th?
11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th.
Why?
Because we had a, what do you call it when you're not fighting no more, not surrender.
It was a peace. It was a peace. But why peace then? Why peace then? Why not at 10 o'clock? Why not the day before, the day after? None of you watched Facebook from our church this morning, did you? So I told you the answer. I warned you in there. November 11th is the feast day of Saint Martin of Tours. Who the heck is that guy? Saint Martin, he was the patron saint of France because a long, long, long time ago he had been a bishop in France and he died in France. He wasn't born there, he was born out east a bit, but he came there. A lot of saints are patron saints of lots of things. So France, he was also the patron saint of soldiers. Okay, he is the patron saint of soldiers. Because way back in the 300s, he had been a soldier. So during the First World War, when France was so attacked in all kinds of ways, the French people, especially the French army, they would pray to Saint Martin the whole time. The whole time through the whole war, they would pray to Saint Martin, patron saint of all things they needed there. And they could have, when it came time for peace, they could have signed it on November 10th or November 12th, but everyone in France said, peace is coming right when Saint Martin wants peace. Let's sign it on the 11th, on the 11th, on the 11th, on the 11th, Saint Martin's Day. So, what kind of soldier was Saint Martin before he was a saint? What was his influence that led eventually to our country's veneration of veterans? Well, Martin's dad was a high-ranking Roman officer. Martin's dad named him Martin because that's the English way to say Mars, which is the Roman god of war. Exactly. Now, we don't know exactly how long Martin was in the military. Some say 3 years, some say 10 years, some say 30 years. There's little discrepancy about when he was born, but somewhere in there, we do know that he guarded the emperor. He was kind of on the secret service for the emperor way back in the 300s. And so he had the opportunity, more than most people, to travel very widely, more than most soldiers, more than most people. He also had the opportunity that others wouldn't have to really get to know the values that founded the empire. And so one day, entering France, we don't know if he'd been there before, but he's not from there, so he enters France, a small city, he goes to the gates, he sees a beggar. And the beggar isn't wearing much clothes. The beggar comes up asking him to give him something. For some reason, something moved him. This happens to many of us when we see just someone in need. Something moved Martin, and he took off this huge military cloak. It must have been the best fabric you could get back then. And he took a sword, and he cut that cloak in half, because he didn't need all that. He kept half of it and gave half to the beggar, which is a beautiful symbol of something. But that night, he kept thinking about it. He kept thinking about this beggar. He decided, over the night, as many of us do, as we just let our minds run and run and run, and say, what's my life about? What am I supposed to do? He decided he's no longer going to be in the military. That was his dad's dream, not his dream. He decided his calling was to create peace for all through the church. Not just peace in this battle or in this thing here. He wanted to create peace for all in the church. So, the next day, as the legend goes, he came into his ranking officer, or whatever they called that back then, and he said, I resign. I cannot be a soldier anymore. So, it wouldn't be great if it just went to like happy joy and birds flew away. Instead, they said, okay, we're going to charge you with cowardice. And they threw him in jail. Ugh, tough start. He goes in jail, and his idea, he tells his soldier people, he says, okay, here's the deal. I will lead the next battle unarmed. If you let me free, I'll go lead the next battle. I'll put all the swords down, put all the shields down and everything. I'll lead the whole army in and we'll attack whoever they are, the German forces, whatever they were. I'll attack them. And if we win, and if I get out alive, you let me free. And they said, deal. And so, just like in Dances with Wolves, he goes out there ready to just attack the whole thing without anything on. And right when they're about to go, what do you think happens? The other side says, please, peace, please. So Martin never has to go into war again. And Martin is given freedom. And so Martin wanders down the street and accepts his side of the bargain, He joins a monastery and serves the church for the rest of his life. That's the foundation of our Veterans Day. Choosing peace over violence. Choosing peace over risking your life, over risking your friends' lives. Sometimes choosing peace by standing up to oppression, hopefully standing up to any oppression, and you embody that peace at every step, in any way. That's where we get Armistice Day. Armistice, of course, means peace from arms. And the ancient Latin had a word for that very idea. The ancient Roman government, anytime they would win a battle and they would achieve peace, anytime another country would grant them peace or another village or anything, they would have a formal announcement of peace. And the word that they would use for armistice, the Latin translation for armistice, is evangelium. Sound familiar to anybody, that word? Because the early Christians, the Greeks, had a very similar word, and that word was evangelion, which in English, does anyone know what it means? What is it? Evangelical, yes, which means good news. That word evangelical is so loaded these days, I don't even like to use it anymore. But in the old days, EV is how you pronounce it in Greek there, means good. And angelion, where we get the word angel, means messenger. So this is a good message, a good news. And peace is good news. War ends, peace is good news. And so the Romans had that, and the Christians, they borrowed that same word. And Jesus used that very word to say, okay, he eventually will have good news for peace. The Romans have good news for peace. I want to give you peace for all things. I want peace for your life, for all that challenges us. I want good news of peace for everything that comes and darkens our door. So today, whatever battles you face, whether it's health, whether it's grief, whether it's pain or shame or anger or addiction, whatever struggles you have, the rain and storms that you face, and you can't even see the rainbow, can't even imagine the birds flying over the rainbow, whatever that is in your life, may you find some peace. May you find God's good news of peace, whatever tries to hold you back. Amen?
Amen.
Okay, now finding peace does not mean that our struggles and our baggage are just easily ignored or diminished or let go of. Can you just let go of it? If we could let go of our baggage, we'd have done it already, right? But here it is with us all the time. Quite the opposite. Martin must have felt enormous weight as he moved toward peace, as he sat in jail, as he faced down an army, as he struggled with the own demons in his head. Facing an addiction, for many of us, often feels just as overwhelming. We can't snap our fingers. We can't just get over with it. It's so overwhelming facing an addiction that we need support. I've never met anyone who could conquer an addiction without people and prayer. And even then, there are times, no matter how much support you have, that peace just doesn't come when you want it. And so you have to keep trying, and keep trying, and keep praying, and keep reaching out for support. Martin must have felt an enormous weight as he moved toward peace. And many of us today, this week, our anger has this way of just curling up in our gut and seething through our heart. Our anger at how certain people are treated in this country. Our anger at how normal it is for children to be shot. Our anger at the disgusting lies and cowardice that pollute our country. Our anger at people that we love who just don't see any problem. Our anger that fills us with rage and despair. That when someone says, well, Hansen, just be calm. Just trust in peace. And I think, you just don't get it, do you? You just Even when we want to be rid of that darkness, and we can't, we have to keep moving in peace. The alternative is just self-destruction. We have to keep moving toward that peace that is offered and offered and offered, more than we can even make that turn toward it. The shame, some of us struggle with shame. You've received forgiveness from that person over there. You've gone to therapy, you've worked through all your stuff. You try not to think about it, and you're getting better at that. You don't want it to affect your next relationship, and you've made all those conversations. You pray for mercy, you pray for grace. All you want is peace in your soul. But once in a while, something just, the angle of something just reminds you of something that fills you with shame and guilt. And there are too many onces in a whiles. And you keep trying to meet yourself softly. Just one more time. Just one more time, let me forget this. One more time, let me be over this. But the grief, that's where it really comes to. It's been so long, I should be fine, right? I've learned to cope, so I should be fine. I have so much support, so I should be fine. I was blessed to know him. I was blessed to know her. I should be fine. I believe that love continues after death. I should be fine. But are we always fine? No. Sometimes that pain, that grief, is just raw. It's unconsolable. Sometimes you get to those moments where you can't even remember what peace would feel like because you're in pain. You keep remembering because you have to, or else it's a tailspin. It's so hard to overcome. If you followed along, or if you know the story, you know that Jim and I stopped this Lazarus story smack in the middle. Smack in the middle where some people do end up in a tailspin. I didn't read the whole story of Lazarus. We stopped at the point where Jesus, and some of you have this image. Many churches have this image of Jesus where Jesus is so divine, so holy, that he is somehow above emotions. And so many of you have been in churches where there's this statue of Jesus hanging with nails through his wrists. And by the way, Jesus, kids in here, you didn't poke the nails through the hands. You stuck through the wrists so you could hang on there, otherwise you'd fall through your hands. He's hanging by the nails through the wrist, and his face is just like, oh, that ain't real. Nothing real about that. Guy was in agony, just dangling here with nails. He was, just moments before that image, he was so tired that he had to drop the cross. Someone else had to carry it up the hill. Just before that night before, he was praying so intently that he sweat blood. That's emotion that I haven't ever reached. Just a few days before that, he was so angry he flipped over tables. That's an emotion I have reached. And so it sounds to me, he was a lot like us, with real feelings, which is kind of a relief. That, he gets it, he understands. He might understand the situation I'm in. God can be with me through this. God isn't distant through this. I'm not alone. Now, I'm sure that Jesus was so grounded that he had a process and a habit of finding calm and peace, even within those emotions that I just described. But we stop the story at Jesus' cries because he was not a spiritual robot. His friend died. There's real grief behind those tears. It's the same grief we feel when we lose someone. The same grief that sometimes chokes away the peace. The same grief that, we've been in these situations that Jesus felt there with Mary badgering him. She was hurting so much that she blamed Jesus, which is kind of ridiculous, but death brings out the ridiculous. I'm not saying that he got caught up in the drama that so often catches families off guard, but maybe some of the pain behind his tears is that thing that happens when we're with people who their nerves are raw and they reach out and get angry. And it's so odd that he doesn't come to Lazarus immediately when he hears Lazarus is sick. And there's this odd business of, oh, he's asleep, he won't die. There's this odd business of, they're going to stone you, it's not safe. I don't know what that's all about, but it's possible. I know in my life when people are in these crises, sometimes I get caught up in my job. Sometimes I get caught up in my own safety, my own comfort. And maybe when Mary challenges him, you could have been here, Jesus thinks, I could have been there. I could have been there. I could have faced the death. And I didn't. And I'm not saying Jesus was wrong at all. But is it possible that there's some regret in those tears? There's regret in some of our tears. I could have done more. Really? You could have done more. He was dying. And it's not your fault. I could have spent more time with her. You did so much. She appreciates that. I could have shown her more love. You were such a source of love for the person you love. I could have done this. I could have done that. Verse 36. Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, do you see how much he loved him? But some said, okay, that man healed a blind man. Well, couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? Really? Does that make sense? Does that make any sense at all? No. Sometimes in death we just start, our minds go in all kinds of crazy places. Verse 38. Jesus was still angry. Still and angry. We heard tears. Now Jesus is angry and still angry. Where did the tears go? Where did the anger go? God is not acting like us with grief. He's dealing with grief. Just like us. When sad, turns to mad, turns to confused, turns to pleading, turns to all mixed up. Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Rolled a Jesus told them, but Martha, the dead man's sister, she protested, Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell's going to be terrible. Which is true and awkward. Verse 40, Jesus responded, listen, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? So they rolled the stone aside. And Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud this time for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you, that they will believe you sent me. And Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Now, some of you in this building think that part of the story is crazy. Jesus wept? Okay. Jesus lifted a blind man up from life? Maybe that's what happened. Maybe Jesus only did that trick one time in his whole life. Maybe Jesus literally used the power of life to foreshadow his own Easter here. Maybe that's what it's about. Maybe this is a story about the resurrection of all things at some end time. And Jews in that time, not a single person in the world when Jesus was resurrected thought that was like the one and only special thing. Anyone who believed in that believed that was the first of an everything. So maybe this is a foreshadowing of that. Or maybe this is a metaphorical story about all the things in our lives that wrap us up and bury us, and all the pain it causes, and all the stink that lands in our lives. And Jesus offers to unbury us, and to unwrap us, and to heal us, and to offer us new life through good news of peace. So I don't know what the second half is really about. It might be all those things. But I do know this. Lazarus, who was raised from the dead, that time, let's say it's literal, let's say it happened. What happened to him later? Is he still around? No. He died again. People died. Mary and Martha, they had to have another funeral. Maybe years later, his friends had to wrap him up again, put the headcloth, put this cloth, bury him again, put him back in the tomb, shed tears again, tell stories again, celebrate his life again, and grieve again. Because death is part of life. Death is part of life, and love is part of life. So grief is part of life. Brokenness is part of life, and joy is part of life. So redemption is part of life. Evil is part of this world, and hope is part of this world. So we are called to make the world better. Chaos is part of this world. Peace is part of this world, so that we know how to make it better. And so today, as we face all the struggles of our life, all the darkness, all the rain before the rainbow, may we make it better by following the good news of peace. May we follow that when we just have to let it be, have to take our pain and just let it be, as our loved ones rest in peace. May we follow that when we have to face all the chaos and pain that we're caught up in. May we follow that as we move from compassion in our